The final trailer for One Piece Season 2 just dropped, and I have been pausing, rewinding, and framing this thing for hours. And I mean that literally. Because this trailer is not just a hype reel, it is a carefully constructed puzzle full of Easter eggs, hidden characters, obscure references, and moments that manga readers are going to absolutely lose their minds over. We are talking about details so small, so blink and you miss it, that if you watch this trailer casually, you probably caught maybe 10% of what is actually in here. The other 90% is what we are going to dig into today. And I promise you, by the end of this breakdown, you are going to want to go back and rewatch that trailer all over again with completely fresh eyes. The trailer opens with an energy that immediately tells you the show has leveled up, and the very first thing we see sets the tone perfectly. Zoro steps into a saloon, and before a single punch is thrown, we hear Mr. Nine taunting him about being outnumbered 100 to 1. Now, if you have been following my breakdowns since Season 1, you already know that Mr. Nine is one of the lower-ranking members of Baroque Works, the massive criminal organization run by the mysterious Mr. Zero. But what is interesting here is not just the fight itself, it is the staging of it. Mr. Nine is positioned up on the second floor of the building, commanding the bounty hunters from above, which is very consistent with what we saw in previous trailers. And when the brawl spills outside, you can still spot him up on the balcony, bat in hand, watching everything unfold from a safe distance. That detail alone tells you a lot about his character. He is the kind of guy who gives orders and lets others do the dirty work, at least until he has no choice but to get involved himself. And speaking of that bat, we get what looks to be a live-action adaptation of Mr. Nine's signature home run technique. For those who do not know, in the source material, Mr. Nine uses a steel cord that extends from his bat to try and immobilize his opponents, wrapping them up before going in for the hit. It is a flashy, theatrical move that suits his personality perfectly. And from what we can see in this trailer, the live-action version is leaning right into that theatricality, which is exactly what you want from this character. The fight choreography looks sharp, and seeing Zoro in this environment, outnumbered and completely unbothered, is exactly the kind of energy that makes his character so compelling to watch. Now, while all of this is happening, there is a tiny detail hiding in plain sight on the counter of the saloon. A bottle. Specifically, a bottle of Old Cactus whiskey. If that name rings a bell, it should, because this is the same brand of liquor that was introduced back in Season 1. The name is a direct reference to Whiskey Peak on Cactus Island, which is the very location where the Straw Hats find themselves at the start of this season. But here's where it gets interesting. The bottles we saw previously were said to have been bottled in Logtown, yet now we are actually going to Whiskey Peak itself, and we know from what has been shown that there is a distillery on the island in the live-action version of the story. So this raises a genuinely fun question. Are we going to learn that this brand of whiskey actually originates from Whiskey Peak? Is this the show quietly building out its own internal lore and continuity in a way that rewards the people who have been paying close attention since the very beginning? Because if so, that is exactly the kind of world-building detail that makes this adaptation special. The trailer then cuts to a shot of Luffy telling the crew to set sail. And the visual details here are doing a lot of narrative work. He is missing a sleeve, the conditions around him look cold, and the ship has that weathered, icy feel that immediately places this scene on Drum Island, which is the final major location of this season. This is almost certainly from the closing moments of the season, the departure scene, and seeing it here gives the trailer this sense of a complete journey, like we are watching the bookends of an entire arc compressed into a 2-minute package. And sitting underneath all of these images is a rendition of Come Sail Away by Styx, which I talked about at length in the official trailer breakdown. The reason this song works so perfectly for One Piece is because thematically, it is about searching for something bigger than yourself, following a dream that keeps expanding the further you chase it. That is One Piece. That is Luffy. That is the entire spirit of this story condensed into a 4-minute rock song. The music choice is not random, it is deliberate, and it lands every single time. Now moving forward in the trailer, we get a scene of the Straw Hats celebrating their journey into the Grand Line, and standing alongside them is Igaram, played by Yonda Thomas. But the background of this scene is where you really want to be looking. Because tucked behind Igaram and Luffy, if you know what to look for, you can spot a woman dressed in a nun's outfit. This is Miss Monday. Now we actually caught a glimpse of her all the way back in the first look teaser trailer from several months ago, where she appeared briefly in the background, and she also showed up in one of the promotional teasers. But this is our clearest look at her so far, and it confirms that Baroque Works agents are already woven into the fabric of Whiskey Peak, even before the Straw Hats realize what is actually going on around them. That dramatic irony, the audience knowing something the crew does not, is one of the things that makes the Whiskey Peak arc so entertaining, and it looks like the live action is going to lean into that fully. Right next to her, on the other side of Luffy, is a bald man in a brown tank top with a white bottom half. Now, I flagged this figure in a previous breakdown and suggested that he might be Hercules, a Baroque Works bounty hunter who originates from the video game One Piece fighting path rather than the main manga. Getting a better look at his outfit here, I am feeling even more confident about that identification. And if that is correct, it is a remarkable thing to think about. The production team is not just adapting the manga. They are pulling from video games, from cover stories, from the extended universe of One Piece, to populate this world with characters that will make longtime fans feel like they are living inside something they have loved for years. Every background detail is a conversation with the audience. Every extra on-screen might be someone who matters deeply to a specific group of fans. That level of care and attention is something you just do not see very often, and it is a huge part of why these breakdowns keep finding things worth talking about. The trailer then shifts to an extended version of a clip we first caught in the first look teaser, and this one is set in Loguetown. The Straw Hats are in the middle of a full-on brawl with Buggy's crew, and Nami is going head-to-head with Alvida. But as always, the real treasure is not in the main action. It is in everything happening around it. Because in the background of this shot, tucked in almost casually like it is just part of the scenery, there is one of those cardboard cutouts. You know the kind. The ones where you stick your face through the hole and take a photo. Except this one is not themed after something fun and lighthearted. It depicts the execution of Gold Roger, the Pirate King himself. And that detail is not accidental, because this entire sequence is taking place during Marine Victory Day, a holiday that exists exclusively in the live action, and celebrates the anniversary of Roger's execution. The whole town of Loguetown has been dressed up for this occasion, and every single prop, every game, every decoration is tied back to the history and mythology of this world in some way. There are carnival games scattered throughout the background that we have seen glimpses of in previous footage, but this trailer gives us enough to really start piecing together the full picture of what Loguetown looks like during the celebration. There is a Hook, a duck booth, which is a quiet and very clever nod to Karoo, the duck that travels with Vivi. There is a cannonball throw game that references Garp's Meteor Fist, the technique where the legendary Marine literally hurls cannonballs with his bare hands like they weigh nothing. And then there is a new game we have not seen before in any of the prior footage. It is called Hoopla, and it appears to be a ring toss game. But what makes it interesting is what it is themed after. The Gorgon. Now, for anyone who needs a refresher, the Gorgon is a creature from Greek mythology, most famously represented by Medusa, the monster with snakes for hair, whose gaze could turn people to stone. But this legend has a very specific and very important counterpart in the world of One Piece. The people of the Kuja tribe, the Boa sisters specifically, were believed by their own people to have been cursed by the Gorgon. It is a story that carries enormous emotional weight when you get to it, and seeing it referenced here as a carnival game in Loguetown, of all places, is one of those details that feels small on the surface, but is actually the show quietly acknowledging a much larger world that exists beyond what we are currently seeing on screen. And then the trailer gives us something that genuinely made me stop and rewind several times, because standing behind Nami in this Loguetown brawl, in the middle of all the chaos, is a man with green hair and an orange and brown jacket. And if you recognize that description, then you already know exactly who this is. That is Bartolomeo. For newer fans, Bartolomeo is a character who does not officially enter the main story until much later, during the Dressrosa arc, which is a significant way down the line from where we are right now. But his entire backstory is rooted in this exact moment. He was in Loguetown. He witnessed Luffy at the execution platform. He watched everything that happened that day, and it changed the entire course of his life. He became completely obsessed with the Straw Hats, followed every single thing they did from a distance, and eventually that admiration pushed him to become a pirate himself. So the fact that he is here, in the background, watching it all unfold in real time, is not just a fun Easter egg. It is the show honoring the internal logic of his character in a way that only the most attentive fans are going to fully appreciate. We have known for a while now that Bartolomeo would be appearing in this season, with early speculation pointing to Naeem Hughes as the actor bringing him to life. And seeing him here confirms that the show is not just throwing him in as a wink to the audience. They are actually placing him within the specific scene that defines who he is as a character. That kind of fidelity to the source material, not just in terms of plot, but in terms of character motivation and history, is what separates a good adaptation from a great one. I am genuinely curious to see how much screen time he gets, whether he will interact directly with any of the crew, and whether we might even get a hint of his devil fruit abilities. In the scene, he appears to be holding some kind of weapon, possibly a club, and even that small detail connects back to the name of his pirate crew, the Barto Club. Nothing in this show seems to be accidental, and Bartolomeo's inclusion here is a perfect example of that philosophy at work. Moving further into the trailer, we get a new shot of Mr. Five on Little Garden, dressed in his outfit from the Baroque Works cover story. Now Little Garden is the second major location of this season, a prehistoric island frozen in time where two giants have been locked in a duel for 100 years. And Mr. Five appearing here in cover story attire is an interesting choice because it suggests the show might be weaving in elements from those cover stories, which in the manga ran in the margins of chapters as small side adventures for supporting characters. Incorporating that material into the main narrative of the live action would be a smart move, giving depth to characters who might otherwise feel underdeveloped if you only know them from their brief appearances in the main plot. But then the trailer gives us something that is genuinely surprising to see in a promotional clip. Because what comes next is one of the most visually spectacular moments of the entire Drum Island arc. Chopper pulling the crew through the night sky on a Kaha sled. This is a moment that in the manga and anime lands with enormous emotional resonance. The setting, the cold night air, the sense of speed and freedom and wonder, all of it comes together into an image that feels almost magical. And the fact that they chose to put this in the trailer at all is a bold decision. This is not a throwaway action beat. This is a centerpiece moment of the arc, the kind of image that sticks with you long after the episode ends. Showing it here means the production team is confident enough in everything else they have built around it that giving away this particular visual is not going to diminish the experience of watching it in context. And honestly, based on everything else we have seen from this season, that confidence feels completely earned. Right after that stunning sled sequence, the trailer shifts to something that has been anticipated for a very long time by fans who have been following this production closely. We get a brief but beautiful clip of a group of pirates gathered on a ship, singing and playing instruments together. And if you know your One Piece lore, your heart probably did something the moment you saw this. Because this is the Rumbar Pirates, the crew that sailed into the Grand Line 50 years ago and left their beloved whale Laboon behind under Crocus's care, promising to return after they had conquered the most dangerous stretch of ocean in the world. It is one of the most quietly heartbreaking threads in this entire part of the story, and the fact that we are going to see it brought to life in live action is something that felt almost impossible to imagine when this show was first announced. Photos of the ship on set leaked over a year ago, so the existence of this storyline has not been a secret for a while. But seeing actual footage of these characters, alive and joyful and full of music, knowing everything that their story eventually becomes, hits differently than any leaked photo ever could. None of the individual crew members we see in this brief clip are easily identifiable when compared to their appearances in the source material. But we know that this storyline will include both Yorkie, the original captain of the Rumbar Pirates, and Brook, the musician who would eventually become the Soul King and the 9th member of the Straw Hat crew. Brooke's backstory is one of the most emotionally devastating things Ichiro Oda has ever written, and the way the anime handled it turned it into one of the most beloved